The honourable member from Calgary Confederation.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. Today I rise on behalf of my constituents in Calgary Confederation and would like to speak to the matter before this House. As many are already aware, we find ourselves debating an issue of great concern, Mr. Speaker. You have found this Liberal government in contempt of the House for their failure to produce documents. Specifically, the Liberals' failure to produce unredacted documents related to the Sustainable Development Technology Canada Fund, or the SDTC, a program widely known as the Green Slush Fund. So it's the Liberals' failure to produce unredacted documents because of its mismanagement by this Liberal government. The Green Slush Fund has been accused of giving grants to startup businesses and developing accelerators with strong ties to senior management in this Liberal government. That, of course, is in violation, as you know, Mr. Speaker, of ethical behavior. And this is very concerning to us on this Conservative side of the House, Mr. Speaker, and obviously it needs to be investigated to determine the actual facts and the appropriate course of action. Of course, we are deeply concerned to hear about the damning facts from the Auditor General that would lead us all to believe that there may be some Liberal insiders that are lining their pockets with taxpayer dollars. All the while, Canadians across this country are struggling to make ends meet. As I just mentioned, Mr. Speaker, the Green Slush Fund management has been accused of giving questionable business grants to those with ties to senior management in the Liberal government. So I stress once again that this needs to be properly investigated. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's hand-picked chair of the Green Tech Slush Fund, Annette Verschuren, a longtime friend of the PM, siphoned $217,000 of taxpayer dollars from this Green Slush Fund into her own company.
Unbelievable.
Also found by the Ethics Commissioner was that Ms. Verschuren broke the law by her actions of improperly furthering her private interests and the interests of other companies she was associated with by failing to recuse herself from the board's funding decisions. Ultimately, she ended up resigning. As you know, Mr. Speaker, she resigned last year after she became the subject of this ethics investigation. And on top of this, another Prime Minister's appointed Green Slush Fund board member also broke ethic laws. So now, Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve to have these Green Slush Fund documents properly and thoroughly examined to determine who all has committed the wrongdoings and at the direction of who. We know from the Auditor General that the wrongdoing discovered has not been appropriately addressed by this Liberal government. We know because officials have confirmed it, there has been no action taken after proven gross mismanagement and conflict of interest were found at the hands of this Liberal billion-dollar Green Slush Fund.
Shocking.
Mr. Speaker, I have listened to the Liberals the past weeks on this issue, trying to whitewash what is going on here. Instead of transparency and clarity, we have been met with silence, deflection, and refusal to release all the findings. What are they hiding? It is important to remind Canadians of what we know, and what we know comes directly from the Auditor General. Mr. Speaker, Canadians have deep respect for the independent Office of the Auditor General and the work that they do to daily uncover mismanagement in this Liberal government. I used to serve for a while, Mr. Speaker, on the Standing Committee of Public Accounts, and the Auditor General, Karen Hogan, would regularly come to the meetings to report on the many files that they forensically investigated. And she did each and every time. She provided valuable, objective fact-based information, and she gave expert advice on their findings. The office is incredibly thorough in the audit work that they do to uncover any irregularities in the accounting and procedural practices of government programs. And I was always highly impressed with the quality of work that her and her staff did while I did serve on that committee, the Committee of Public Accounts. Well, the Auditor General did look, Mr. Speaker, as you know, into this green slush fund, and her findings were shocking. They found the fund violated its conflict of interest policies 90 times. The fund awarded $59 million to 10 projects that were ineligible, and these projects frequently overstated the required environmental benefits of its projects. The report from the Auditor General says things like, overall, we found significant lapses in Sustainable Development Technology Canada's governance and stewardship of public funds. It also said that Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada did not sufficiently monitor the compliance with the contribution agreements between the Foundation and the Government of Canada. And there's more from the Auditor General. Her report also said, we found that the Foundation awarded funding to projects that were ineligible, that had conflict of interest, existed in some instances, and that certain requirements in Canada's Foundation for Sustainable Development Technology Act were not met. And it doesn't stop there. The report also says, we found that the Foundation awarded funding to 10 ineligible projects of the 58 that were examined. These 10 projects were awarded $59 million, even though they did not meet key requirements set out in the contribution agreements between the government and the Foundation. So there were 10 projects, Mr. Speaker, 10 projects of the 58 that the Auditor General examined. Imagine what would have been uncovered if all 58 projects were examined by this Auditor General. Then the Auditor General, she dropped another bombshell when she said in the report, in addition, we estimate that 1 in 10 of the remaining startup and scale-up projects approved during our audit period were also ineligible. Unbelievable, Mr. Speaker. It's unbelievable that 10% of the projects were estimated to be ineligible. Who is lining whose pockets with this type of behavior? So that is why, Mr. Speaker, we have good reason to be suspicious of those involved at the highest level because of what this Auditor General has discovered. Let me go on with the Auditor General in the report here. It also said in the report that we found 90 cases that were connected to approval decisions representing nearly $76 million in funding awarded to projects where the Foundation's conflict of interest policies were not followed. So it is no wonder the Liberals are not keen to have anyone review these documents, Mr. Speaker. We also know from the Auditor General that attempts were made to keep this dirty circle of secrets as small as possible. The AG revealed that the Act requires that the Foundation have a member council consisting of 15 members. 15 members to play an important role in representing Canadian taxpayers to oversee the ethical functioning of the Foundation. Well, this Green Slush Fund Board of Directors supported reducing that number from 15 down to 2. 2 members. Why would a billion-dollar slush fund want to keep their circle so small? Down to 2 members. Inquiry minds want to know, Mr. Speaker. Likely because they knew it would be easier to get away with their dirty secrets by the less people that they knew. We will only know if a proper investigation takes place, and that is why the RCMP need to have access to all the documents in an unredacted form. I want to also mention a few other key findings from the Auditor General. The report states The fund's board approved 226 startup, scale-up, and ecosystem projects to receive $836 million. 8 of those projects, totaling $51 million, did not meet eligibility criteria. For example, some projects did not support the development or demonstration of a new technology, or the projected environmental benefits were unreasonable. It also says in the AG report, we estimated that 1 in 10 of the remaining 168 startup and scale-up projects approved during our audit period, or 16 projects in total, were ineligible. 2 ecosystem projects totaling $8 million were ineligible because they did not fund or support the development or demonstration of a new technology. And the board approved $20 million for seed projects without completing screening and assessments required by the contribution agreements with the government. This is unbelievable, yet it is true, Mr. Speaker. How can these Liberal members opposite find the gall to stand up here daily and suggest that this matter is not worthy of a full investigation? How can they look at themselves in the mirror and say that? This is troubling. It is troubling. It's the lack of transparency, accountability, and integrity from the Liberal government is an issue that strikes the very core of how we, as Canadians, expect our government to operate. What was the incentive to break so many rules? And who benefited? Who provided the direction to allow for so much of this mismanagement? We know that when people break rules, it is always for their personal gain, at the expense of the greater good. Why would we expect this case to be any different? And where has the Liberal Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry been all along? I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, he's likely been sleeping on the job here, and he must follow his Green Slush Fund chairperson, Ms. Verschuren, and her steps and resign. Canadians will remember. They will remember the corruption of this Liberal government come the next election. I guarantee it, Mr. Speaker. This Liberal government is in full damage control right now, Mr. Speaker, in a desperate attempt to save their parliamentary jobs. No wonder they don't want to let Canadians anywhere near a ballot box, because they know Canadians are itching to get rid of them. This is why we need an election now. Let Canadians decide. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are paying attention to this. While they are struggling, this Liberal government ignores their plight. The real income of Canadians has plummeted to a level not seen in almost a decade. Paychecks are just not as powerful as they used to be. Canadians are falling behind as the cost of living increases faster than the ability of their paychecks to keep up. The dependency of Canadians on food banks is growing exponentially and shows no sign of slowing down. It is frankly shocking and deeply unsettling that people who have decent jobs are unable to put enough food on the table in a country like Canada. We know housing in Canada is out of reach for basically anyone who has not already got a home. The price of housing, including rents, continue to outpace wages. Folks work harder and fall further behind. How is that right in a country like Canada? Canada's fastest growing housing type is a tent. Tent cities, a phenomenon not really ever seen in Canada, are now a part of every city and even many towns. People just can't afford to eat, heat, or house themselves in Canada today. How desperate must life be when you live in a tent in the winter here in Canada? That is why Canadians are so concerned and why they are so angered when they hear of Liberals lining their pockets. You see, Mr. Speaker, Canadians know this government is beyond repair, and it is time for an election. However, any election should not and will not eliminate our calls for accountability when it comes to this slush fund. We will get to the truth of the matter here, Mr. Speaker. We owe it to Canadians to pursue the facts and hold those responsible for this mismanagement accountable. If there is criminality, we owe it to Canadians to pursue charges against those involved. There are millions of Canadians who are struggling to pay rent, pay their mortgage, put food on their table, and put gas in their car. Nonetheless, they go to work every day and they pay their taxes. We need to make sure that we treat those hard-working Canadians with the utmost respect. Every tax dollar is a missed meal, a missed night out, a new pair of jeans, or a visit to a sick relative. Taxes are essential for our society, but they all come with a cost to the individual. We need to ensure that if we are going to deprive Canadians of a home of their own, a haircut, or a new book, we need to do it with the utmost of necessity and spend that money as if it were our own. I can assure you that not a single member opposite mismanages their personal finances at a level that they do when it comes to our money, the money of Canadian taxpayers. I am just astounded that the Liberal MPs opposite continue to defend and support their party leader and the disgusting behavior of their governance. What will their children and grandchildren think of them when this truth finally gets out? And it will get out, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you of all people know how important it is that Canadians have faith and respect for our institutions. That faith and respect comes when people see that those institutions are functioning as intended and rules are being followed and individuals are not personally enriching themselves with tax dollars. To restore faith in Parliament, that faith in government, we need to ensure that proper investigation is done, and it is only possible when the RCMP have everything they need to do a proper review. So therefore, the Liberal government must release the documents now. Now, moving forward, Mr. Speaker, there are steps to rebuild trust and accountability. The Auditor General's report is not just criticism, it is a call to action. We need to take the following steps to address this issue, Mr. Speaker. First of all, the minister needs to resign. Second, the minister needs to implement 4 things. He needs to strengthen the oversight mechanism. It is essential. Enhance the oversight. We need clear, robust guidelines for the allocation of funds with a transparent review process to ensure that projects that meet strict environmental criteria receive support. We need regular audits also, Mr. Speaker, by the Auditor General to monitor how these funds are being used. We need a commitment to true sustainability. We must focus on the original purpose of the fund investing in these projects that genuinely contribute to a cleaner, greener future. And we need public engagement. The public deserves to know how their money is being spent. So in conclusion, the Green Slush Fund was intended to be a catalyst for positive environmental change, and instead it's been a disappointing fiasco. It is imperative that we address these issues head-on and reaffirm our commitment to transparency, accountability, and sustainability. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.